Draw Steel provides us with a game that is heroic, tactical, and cinematic, and today we're going to learn how to play it in just 5 rooms. Draw Steel is one of the fantastic, awesome new games that are out there, providing really neat experiences that on one hand are a little bit familiar. If you've played D&D, you can see how this feels. And with Draw Steel, particularly if you've played 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, you will feel some familiarity. But they're entire new systems that work really amazingly cohesively across the heart of the game to create a really neat experience that's different than anything you've played before. So even if you're familiar with 4E skill challenges and are inspired perhaps by them still today, when you play a Draw Steel montage or a negotiation, there'll be something familiar but very new. And you'll see that the systems that are there will tie into the larger game itself. Similarly, all kinds of things like taking a rest have entire neat systems about them that push the envelope of what a role-playing game provides as an experience. This game is heroic, so it means that you're big, bold heroes. It's cinematic, so the threats are big and bold as well. You are fighting in what would feel fitting for a movie, right? Imagine that you've got an unlimited set budget. That's the kind of fun situations that you're creating. It's not mundane, low-key play. It's big, exciting, flashy type of combats. And it's tactical. It's meant to be played on a grid. The powers that you have, the features that you have for your character are things that involve the map, how far away you are, whether you can push someone into someone else, those kinds of things. And this creates a lot of interest and excitement by both players and DM to use these different tactical bits effectively and in rewarding ways, right? I have set your character up to do this so that when they do it, you get this benefit because of the way I used my ability. So those are some of the really neat angles that the game provides. We'll get into some of that today, but this is meant to be a video that's just going to walk you into the process of playing Draw Steel, or that you, if you are the director, which is the term for the DM, you can use this video as a inspiration, a how-to that you could use to teach the game for others by just doing a simple adventure in the 5-room dungeon style. If you haven't seen my previous videos on 5-room Learn to Play, it is based off of John Four's technique. But in this case, I use the 5 rooms as a method by which you can teach a new role-playing game or create an intro experience for people. And I've made previously videos on how to play a D&D and how to play Savage Worlds Deadlands and how to play Pirate Borg. So all of those you can refer to those, as well as my first video that breaks down the concept of what you can do and why it's important to have particular intro experiences and how often at conventions or other places, even in starter sets, you don't get a great starting experience because it's overly complicated. Key to these techniques are going to be a couple of different steps. You can see the 5 rooms here, and these 5 rooms are actual rooms of sorts. Let's say their rooms can be an outdoor scene, or it can be on the lake or on the boat, or it can be an actual dungeon room, but some kind of encounter scene taking place. And they're going to provide different facets of the game so that we get to learn the game easily in a good way. This is an intro approach that we're trying to do with this, even if the players might be quite skilled and might be used to playing all kinds of different games. The idea behind this 5-room Learn to Play is that you are easing someone into a new role-playing game, in this case, Draw Steel. So what we're going to do with these techniques is actually take parts of the game or parts even of the character sheet, introduce them over time. Our first room is going to focus on skills. Then we're going to have an easy, fun fight where we learn the mechanics of combat. We're going to do a role player negotiation, and here for Draw Steel, quite literally a negotiation, because that is a system that you can use. Then we're going to showcase some other aspect of gameplay. In this case, we'll do a montage, and then we'll end with a thrilling boss battle that leaves the players satisfied and feeling like they got to really understand their characters. Now, when it comes to learning Draw Steel, it's worth my saying that you can find a number of adventures that serve as on-ramps already. You can get Road to Broadhurst free, just downloading it from the mcdmproductions.com website. That is a neat sort of one long session adventure that walks you through a number of different types of the parts of the game. You could also go to their store in their shop And MCDM has Delian Tomb, which is really awesome. You can get that adventure in a number of ways. You can get it by buying dice, and it comes with a code for the adventure, which is really neat digitally. You can get it eventually in print or a box set. It will be eventually, but that is their sort of start here adventure. But it is a long experience meant to really be a starting campaign. A thing that Delian Tomb, the adventure, does that's really cool is it takes the character sheet and gives it to you in a set of pregens with the idea that you will step through those pregens. So in the first battle, you'll just use certain parts of your character sheet, which is really clever, certain abilities, and then you'll use more of your abilities over time as instructed as the kind of adventure builds up. That's a really neat way to learn your character sheet, which is very effective. So we'll take a look at those character sheets as part of this. But let's go into part one, the skills. So for this part, I'm going to use a map from Talon of Umberlee, I believe it's called. It's a special layer salt D&D adventure that came out during the end of 4th edition. It's a really neat map with all these ships put together. And let's set up a premise here for what the heroes are going to encounter. So let's say that the heroes have been hired to investigate the lair of an old pirate lord, rumored to be abandoned. No one's seen the pirate in years. Clearly, they must have died off with all of their pirate crew. But your employer says, there was this treasure that was supposed to be there. And depending on the kind of encounter you're doing, you can just leave it at that because you're just doing an intro. Or if you wanted to tie it into a longer campaign, it could be some item that's interesting and important to the larger campaign. Maybe even finding it starts off the campaign, right? You can imagine a lot here, but for our purposes, we're just going to say there is treasure there to be had. The employer provides you with a small ship, or maybe even a ride on a ship, drops you off at the small dock, and it's just a couple hours before dusk by the time you arrive there. And you can see there's that small dock there. So they drop you off there. Maybe they're even waiting, that's up to you. But there's just a single door there. And if you circumnavigate it at first, you'll see that this layer is built upon a sort of reef. But the waves are constantly crashing here. It's dangerous to go about it because of the way the waves move. The way the rocks are formed, it's easy only to get to this small dock. But going around it at a distance, you could see that this is a very old, weather-beaten location that is actually made by various ships being brought together. There could be some neat lore about how the different, the pirate lord maybe conquered various pirates and forced them to donate a ship to this base, and it represents, all of them working together, something like that. But it's really neat. And here in this case, I just wanted to use this evocative map. So that's the premise and why you've arrived here. When you walk in, you find the door is open. It's not trapped. There are no obvious dangers here. And you walk into this central feast hall with a vaulted ceiling, central raised platform, 2 large tables, many chairs, large casks. No one is there. Nothing is stirring. And there are also, I should say, chandeliers, very important for pirate type combats. And now it's time for tests. So test is what we would call in many games a skill. If you saw my previous video that I did recently on can you re-roll a skill check when you fail it, skills have a lot of interesting approaches in different games. And I really like how MCDM writes up in Draw Steel that a test should be done when consequences are interesting or there will be a dramatic result. You don't just roll if eventually you can overcome thing or if there's no real interesting outcome to be had. I think that's pretty neat. I will at some point do a video about how I actually tend to like rolling a fair bit in games, and kind of talk through that concept. But for now, we're going to assume that we're going to allow here to move beyond just consequences being interesting. And in this case, it's really the information is going to be interesting. So the director, that's the DM in this game, can call for a test and choose the characteristic that sets the difficulty. All right. So for a skill roll, step 1, call for a test and say, I need a test that uses your, and where we're going to use one of the ability scores that we decide is appropriate to the test. It could be more than one. Might for physical strength, agility for physical coordination and nimbleness, reason for mental acumen and education, whether it's formal or otherwise, intuition if it's observation and instinct, and presence for force of personality. That's your charisma type things you might be used to. So a test is a type of roll called a power roll. And in this game, unlike many others, you roll 2d10 and add them together. A little bit like Dagger Heart, except d10s instead of d12s. And then you're going to add the bonus or the penalty from the ability that the director mentioned. So it's a might test, roll 2d10, add or subtract your might bonus depending on what you've got. That's your outcome, right? But there's a little more. If you have a skill that applies, that gives you a +2. And there are a lot of skills in this game. So if you were trying to do something like move the large tables to see if there's anything underneath it, and you have a skill that works with that, then that would give you a +2. The director approves the skill. So think of it as director declaring the ability and the player coming up with the skill that applies. There are 3 difficulties to tests: easy, medium, and hard. And unlike other games, there is no DC. So there is not a difficulty class you're trying to hit. It's not like this is a DC 14, the next thing is a 16. No. That is really interesting about Draw Steel. You aren't rolling to hit a number that varies. Whenever you're making a power roll with those 2d10s, you are trying to get the highest possible, yes, but it's one of 3 tiers: less than 11 or 11, 12 to 16, and 17 and higher. And then a natural 19 or 20 is going to be a crit. So that is going to be always a success with the reward. But there is this neat test difficulty outcomes that are produced by these tiers of that you achieve, right? Whether you get tier 1, 2, or 3 results. This is true of all kinds of power roll tests that you do, including in combat. So we'll see that a lot. And then what happens when you hit that certain tier is going to be based either on your feature that you have that you're tapping into, like a certain type of attack that you have access to from your class, or in the case of tests, it's going to be whether it's that easy, medium, or hard outcome is going to drive what happens. So let's take a look at this. And I will say, if you've seen my video on Draw Steel adventure tools, I'm going to use that now to show you the rules because it's a great way to capture the rules in one place. So you can see here, and I'm looking at the combat spreadsheet here, but we also have a rules location that has this information and additional information. But here in the spreadsheet, we show the outcomes in a simple table. So if it's an easy test and you roll less than 11 or 11 or less, you get a success with a consequence. So you still succeed because it's easy, right? But something else happens to shake things up. If you get a 12 to 16, you get a success. And if you get a 17 or higher, you get success with a reward. Same thing if you get a critical hit. If it's a medium test, however, that's where your tier 1 is going to drive a failure. And your tier 2 will be a success with a consequence. 17 is success, and so on. A hard test, even the 12 to 16 is a failure, but it's the 17 plus that brings the success, and only the crit that will grant you that success or the reward. So you can see how this becomes easier or harder based on the overall test quality, the test difficulty. Actually, if I go and look at the rules tab here in our adventure design tools for Draw Steel, you can see the different skills that exist in the game. And so those are all possible. I'll give you examples of the type of things that you might say, like exploration, I'm climbing something, I'm jumping over something, maybe crafting, I'm using mechanics or forgery, interpersonal skills, I'm interrogating or I'm lying, I am performing or persuading, intrigue skills, I am picking a lock, hiding, sabotaging, sneaking, and then there are lore skills, nature, psionics, right? Different things I might know. So you can see those types of tests and a lot of other rules here. Okay, so those are the basics. One last thing is that if you have some circumstance that helps, you can gain what's called an edge, which gives you a +2. However, if you have 2 edges, you don't get +4. Instead, you will get a result that is 1 tier higher. And there are more rules to sort of edges and banes. We won't get into that level because, again, the idea of this is that we're doing a fairly simple intro. So really what would happen, right? If I were the director for this and you walk into the room, you and the other players, your characters walk into the room, you take a look around and you start looking to examine things, right? And I say, okay, you just asked me, you say you want to check out that raised platform, see if anything has moved on it recently. And I decide as director that that's an intuition check. And maybe the adventurer says it, or I'm making it up, and I say, it's an easy test. Character asks if they can use alertness or search skills. I say search would apply. They have search, they're trained in, so they get a +2 to that. They have a +2 intuition, so that's a total of +4 on the roll. So let's say you had a magnifying glass that gives you an edge because you can really see the details with it. It's a tool you had. And maybe another character has successfully made a test to help you, granting you an edge. You would have 2 edges, which would make the result 1 tier higher, right? So that's a possibility. But let's say that you're just doing this +4 roll. You've got your intuition +2. You've got a +2 for the skill. Now, if we get a result that is, because this is an easy check, right, we're going to either get success with a consequence, success, or success with a reward. You're getting success either way. And so you're going to learn that the furniture has actually moved really recently. In fact, constantly. This is being moved like this is a tavern where every day there are customers moving it to and fro. There are wear marks on the chairs, on the ground. The table has been marred countless times with nicks and scratches from knives, carving names and graffiti over the years. Again, it very much the sense of if this were an active tavern where every day customers are here, or at least every night. One that I might also, either as a second check, or I might even say if it's success with a reward, that you can pick up that one of those scratches in the table actually reads, if you look at it the right way, you see that it's the words, "Every night we must revel, but never can we rest." You can tell that this place has the tables, chairs, the casks all suggest this place could hold 20 or more pirates, and that would not be a test to do that. But I might have other tests depending on what I want to do with this location to gather additional information. That's the key thing that I'm looking for people to uncover. But I could, in this scenario, have some more to allow various people to have skills. Like maybe when this place was built, that might be a test to determine how old this place is. Might do a test to know how sound this place is, which is that it is actually physically starting to age from all the weather and waves. It will not last probably another 5 years. So that's interesting, and that recovering the treasure has to be done soon or it'll be forever lost. Now, when you get a consequence or a reward, you actually get a lot of ideas in the book. And in this case, we're looking for a small but significant complication or benefit. So we get some guidance like common rewards accompanying success include automatically accomplishing a related follow-up task that would typically require a test. So if you're going to like climb to the ledge and then look out, you might do both because you climbed so easily. Allowing an ally engaged in the same task to accomplish the task without needing to make the test as well. So you're climbing up a wall and you pull your friend up without, or show them exactly how to climb so they get up as well. You could even do multiple allies and it would be okay. There are examples of that in play. Obtaining a consumable treasure or useful piece of mundane equipment. So you're searching and you find that near one of the mugs, there's actually a potion bottle that you can take, and it, is a curative or something similar. You might learn a piece of helpful information, which was the example I just gave a bit ago with our test. Impressing or ingratiating yourself with someone who grants you a small favor. Noticing a hidden danger well before it strikes, giving you time to avoid or prepare for it. And you can always just say, hey, you get a hero token. And a hero token is kind of reroll. It has some categories to it, but think of it as a sort of reroll that you could get for tests that are not the combat tests. So they are like this kind of test that we're doing here. They can also be used to heal some damage. That's important. A number of other uses. So again, we won't go super into every part of the rules. With a reward, you might provide more information. With a consequence, you might do something like foes. You make noise alerting foes that are nearby. You might trigger trap or hazard, break an important piece of equipment. You might make a false assumption, or create a situation that you must do another test to get out of. Like maybe your foot punches through the surface and you're kind of stuck and you're trying to now pull out without causing damage to yourself. As a consequence here, I might, thinking of what I know will come later, I might say something like, well, if you succeed with a consequence, you actually knock over one of the mugs and chip it. And it's the mug that sits at the head of the table. So whoever is important that sits here, right? The Pirate King. And that might affect the later scenes that we'll do. So we could have a number of tests here to unravel a larger mystery, but the primary thing that I would look to in this scene that I'm thinking of for our first room is these skills tell you roughly how old this place is and the fact that it's constantly in use. But maybe interestingly, there are no prints leading in and out of the room that are recent. So somehow people are here or the furniture moves or something without walking in and out of this room all the time. Okay. So that is our first room. We get to do some skills. Now, let me actually show you the character sheets. All right, so here we are looking at the character sheet, and you will notice there's a lot to it because Draw Steel is a game that has a lot of tactical complexity. But if we look at this, we can see that all we would really be telling our players is to look at the might, agility, reason, intuition, presence, right? Our ability scores here. And we would look at our list of skills, which are listed here. That would tell us what we could do, right? That alertness or search, for example. And if we're making a intuition test, we're -1, but +2 for the search. So we would bet +1 overall on the roll. And that's where we could do that roll and see what our outcome is and then see how we do. So if we roll, a 5 and a 6, we get an 11, but it's +1 and we get 12, which is just over that tier 1. So we get to tier 2, it's a success, not a success with a consequence. So room 1 got us rolling, got us understanding the basics of a power roll, maybe some working together. There is a rule for assisting another person, so we can get into that. But it gets us into some basic rolling and interest in the scenario. And from this central room, if I put up the map again, you can see that there are a number of ways we could go. And for the ease of this scenario, I'm going to say that it doesn't matter which room they choose. It will lead to our next encounter, which is an easy, fun fight. And so I'll just improvise the terrain based on the terrain that's there, because the terrain's not supposed to play a major role. But here I'm going to try to teach the basics of combat. And Daily Entomb, as I mentioned, has that neat idea of using your character sheet in phases, which is pretty cool. So let's talk about the situation and the character sheet. First, the situation. So we want something easy. Maybe it's a griffin. The griffin is a level 2 elite creature. And if we were to look in the adventure tools, we'd see that that's an so it's not too easy that it won't matter at all. We just have this single griffin. It comes here during the day, resting in between hunting. It sees the heroes as prey, pretty straightforward, but interestingly, it's going to flee if it's winded, meaning under half its stamina. So that's how I'm keeping this to be pretty low key. Even though it's already an easy encounter, it will retreat. Now, I could always alter that as DM to make it, if it needs to stay a little longer so everybody gets a hit in, that's a great way to do something that's a learn to play situation. All right, let's take a look at the character sheet again. And you can see how in Daily Entomb, the character sheet is broken up by encounter. So when you're first level and you're doing your first encounter, that's where you learn about what's called your focus, which in this case, we're playing the High Elf Tactician. And I should actually scroll up so you can see the cool art. So this is the High Elf Tactician. Very cool. You get that so you know as your player, okay, that's the kind of character I'm playing. I'm this High Elf soldier career Vanguard subclass tactician. The tactician is like a warlord shouting out instructions, guiding the others. And I get a thing called focus. At the start of a combat encounter or some other stressful situation, I get focus equal to the number of victories. So it's not going to be any yet. But I'm going to get at each of my turns during combat 2 focus. So at the start of this turn, I get 2 focus, and that will power some of these abilities. And the first time in each combat round that you or an ally damages a creature marked by me, I gain a focus. As you can see, there's some tactical stuff going on here. First time in a combat round that any ally within 10 squares of you uses any heroic ability, you also will gain 1 focus. You're going to lose that at the end of the encounter. So it's sort of a power-up feature that will let you do cool things over time. And that's really what I would stress. Each of you, take a moment, read the block that's at the beginning of your character sheet under first level, first encounter. You're going to have an ability for the tactician. It's called focus. And these are things you watch out for because they're going to give you points and fuel your abilities. Cool. Now, for this first encounter, we've got a couple of different attacks you can do. Something called a signature ability, Protective Attack. It's melee 1, so it's melee range, a single creature. And I'm going to roll my 2d10 plus 2 and see whether I do a certain amount of damage, from low damage to higher damage. And an effect, the target is taunted until the end of the next turn. That's a condition. It means they want to attack you more than others. Or I could do 2-shot. When you fire 2 arrows back to back, both hit their mark. Ranged 12 attack, 2 creatures or objects. I shoot and I deal damage, no special effects. Then I also have something called a maneuver, and this gets us into the action economy game. We'll touch in a bit. I can do my mark. From a range of 10, I can mark a creature, and until I am dying or until I use this ability again, they are marked until the end of the encounter. I can willingly end my mark on the creature. When they're marked by me and reduced to 0 stamina, I can then use another action to free triggered action to move that. So if you use to Hunter's Mark that a ranger has in D&D, very similar. And what it does is whenever you or an ally uses an ability to deal roll damage to a creature marked by you, I can spend a focus to get a benefit, like dealing an additional 4 damage to them. Or the creature dealing the damage can spend a recovery and heal. Or the creature dealing the damage can shift up to 2 squares without provoking attacks of opportunity. So this is kind of the neat tactical angle of the game, right? My mark will enable these powers, and it focuses me, it causes me, the player, to want to focus on what I'm doing and how I can spend my special currency, my heroic currency, which is the focus, and use these abilities, right? So it's the kind of game where I don't just take my turn and take a nap or look at my phone. I'm watching what players do because I may gain focus. I may want to spend focus, right, on a marked target. And I may want to communicate things like, hey, everybody attack the marked target, right? Here's the kind of things that I can do. So that's really neat, right? And that's, we'll just stop there for now as to what your first level can do. But every character sheet has something like this that you can do, a combination of abilities that you can take and, ways to power your abilities. So, all right. Let's pause there and say that since let's talk about what's going on in this combat on the monster side. Now, of course, we wouldn't show our monster off to our players. It would be a secret on our side. We might communicate some things based on our DM style. But in general, it has a stat block like this, and you can see it's using the same rules as the players are in terms of having different tiers. So it can attack with its claw swipes against 2 creatures within melee 1 range. And if it gets the lowest tier result, it's going to deal 7 damage, and it can shift a square, right? So move 1 square without causing attacks opportunity. It can also, if it gets a medium result, 12 to 16 tier 2, 10 damage and shifts more, and so on. And the effect, this ability can be used as part of the charge main action. If it does so, if you charged as part of this, when that's one of the actions you can take, it can grab one of the targets. So it could actually grab you in its claws, which is pretty neat. And because it can fly, it could do that, upwards and kind of grab you with it. That's really neat. But that's not all it can do. So that is its main signature ability. But it can also do more than that. It can crack the earth if it's flying, and if it has a creature grabbed or an object, it can fly half their speed towards the ground, hurl the thing it's grabbed down at the ground. The creature or object hits the ground to turn the area into an impact crater, takes falling damage that can't be reduced, and then it deals damage to each enemy in a size 3 cube, which is really cool. So a 3x3 area of the map, it's just basically sending out shockwaves as it slams the person or thing that it grabbed and causes that damage. So we could choose to, for example, soften the blow by saying it just picks up like a table and chucks it, right? Or we could make it a character, if we want to be fully punishing the characters and upping the challenge level. And as you can see, the tiers will have different effects. So damage goes up the higher the tier success. And then it has something called a potency, where you compare against their ability scores. And so we use the abbreviations here. If your agility is less than 1 and you achieve tier 2 result, then the target is pushed 3 squares. If you got tier 3 result for crack the earth as the director, then you say, hey, are any of these folks that are in this area, is your agility lower than 2? If it is, you are pushed 4 and knocked prone. And the reason these pushes matter is that in Draw Steel, unlike most RPGs, when you push something, if you strike another creature or an object, you take damage equal to the remaining force movement that was available. So push 3, if I'm right next to a wall, I don't move at all, I take 3 damage. Or if I was 2 away from the wall, I would move 2 towards the wall and then take 1 damage because I couldn't move that last square of movement. So a bigger push means I'm dealing more damage. I'm shoving you aside, dealing additional damage if you hit other creatures or objects. And if you hit a creature, both creatures take that damage that's being dealt. Pretty cool. I also have a wing buffet. This requires what's called Malice to be spent, and that's a DM currency. And so what's fun is, if I'm running this combat, I would let people know if I spent Malice to do things. Partly because other heroes may actually have an ability that triggers off of my spending Malice, but also because it's cool to communicate, all right, I'm spending this currency that I have, and I'm going to do this wing buffet that just pushes people. And I can push a certain amount. And if their agility is lower based on the tier of success I got, right, whether it's agility 0, 1, or 2 that I'm comparing about, then I can actually even move you up or down in addition to sideways because I have the ability to choose to move you vertically. So that's kind of cool that I could just shoot you up into the air by buffeting my wings and cause you to take falling damage. I could maybe even move you off into one of the pits that's on this map, one of the holes in the ground or outside a broken wall. So you land in the ocean. So I'd have to come up with some rules for what it takes to get back into the fight. I don't want it to be too hard, but just enough that it would be a fun challenge. So that is a maneuver. And then I have a triggered action where if the Griffin takes damage, I can have that damage and I can shift up to 2 squares. That's kind of cool. I'll also ignore any effects from that damage. And the last bit of the stat block is Beast of Prey. While grabbed by the Griffin, a creature has a double bane on the escape grab maneuver. So it's really hard to escape the grab of the Griffin. And any power roll that would knock the Griffin or their rider prone takes a bane, right? -2 to that. Pretty cool. So that is what the Griffin does. As monsters go for Draw Steel, this is pretty typical of what's called an elite monster. The elite is worth a couple of creatures worth, but it is this is a game where your monsters tend to have really cool abilities. We'll look at another in the future that's really a neat monster. But the idea is the DM is going to be excited to show these features as you're going into this fight. Now, remember, this is going to be an easy, fun fight, right? So I'm not looking to really pressure the characters. I'm not looking to be the most tactical in this case. I'm just giving them a bit of a feel for that tactical cinematic flavor and how cool a fight with this Griffin can be. So I may just start by dropping a piece of furniture down and using that AoE, which is kind of cool. Let them get some hits on me. Then I might spend some Malice to do this. And let's talk through how this combat plays out. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to roll initiative. Initiative is treated as a type of side initiative, if you're familiar with that term. We're going to determine if one side should have the advantage. If we know, for example, that the characters, let's say they listened at the door and they heard that the Griffin was there and they know it. And so they go, shh, and they all wait. And on 3, they open the door and storm out to attack. Well, I'm just going to have the PCs, the heroes go first, right? But if on the other hand, they just open it to just see what happens to be there, well, then we're going to just determine who has initiative. And what we do is we roll a d10, and whoever made that roll, if it's me, a 4+ means I go first. Or if I chose a player to make the roll, which is what I usually do, then that player that rolls for the whole group, they get a 4+ and their side goes first. Otherwise, it's the other side. So that one side gets to choose who will go. So if it's the players, they got a 4+, they get to decide, all right, we're going to send in the Elven Tactician, and here's what the Tactician's going to do. They're going to mark, all those kinds of things, right? They take their turn. Then it will go to the other side. And that other side gets to choose a monster. Now, in my case, I only have the one Griffin. So once I have gone, let's say the Tactician goes, the Griffin goes, now all the rest of the players can just go in whatever order they want because I have no one else left to go. But if I had a number of creatures on my side, I would be, each time that it becomes my turn, choose a creature to go or a group of creatures and then go back to the players and so on. So we're going side by side, driven by that first initial roll. We are not using things like our dexterity skill to say who goes first. It's not, we're using a variation of this sort of side initiative. This is actually quite fun and powerful. You can see I made a video that looks at how a nice way to track initiative on top of my DM screen, because it really drives a neat play cadence with the players taking turns. It's really nice for the tactical side of this game. So we've rolled initiative. The heroes have won. The tactician goes in, and you saw the character sheet of the tactician. Let me pull that back up. And you remember those different types of actions? Well, we get to take 3 types of actions in each round. We can move. We can take our main action to take an attack using a cool class ability. We could also do a thing like charge and do a free action. Then we also can do a maneuver, which is a maneuver action is something like knocking someone back, pushing somebody. It could be aiding someone's attack, so the next person will get a benefit to attacking my target. Catch breath to spend a recovery and regain our stamina, which are like hit points. It could be hiding, grabbing, making a test, so a skill check as part of your round. Those all are maneuvers. Using a consumable like drinking a potion, standing up, those are all maneuvers. So it's a little bit like bonus actions. It's a little bit like the minor actions in 4th edition, if you're familiar with those. That's what a maneuver is like. So we've got our movement, our main action, and our maneuver that we can do every round. We don't have to use those, but we often do. Like any melee character will generally, if it has nothing else to do, try to knock someone into a wall or something like that with knockback. So if we're playing this tactician, I'm probably going to use the maneuver to mark somebody, right? That's great. I mark my target from a distance. I move up, and I might use protective attack to taunt them so that they will further want to focus on me rather than one of my vulnerable allies. And when I use that protective attack, that's going to be melee. I'm going to roll my 2d10 plus 2. The plus 2 is coming from my might that I'm attacking with, right? Because it's a might-based attack. And then I'm going to see which of those 3 tiers I get. This is a power roll, but it's not a test. And so I'm not going to add a skill here. I'm going to use this ability block to guide what happens. We get abilities over time as we level. We'll get more abilities from our class. We can get sometimes abilities from our kit. So you can actually see on the corner of the character sheet the shining armor and rapid fire kits give me some abilities. I could get something from magic items or any number of ways. A cool title might give me an ability. If I became, the champion pit fighter, I might get a neat kind of pit fighter thing that I can do. Right? Now, one interesting thing that you may recall, just like with skills, there isn't a DC. When I'm attacking to hit a monster, or when a monster is attacking to hit me, I'm not targeting defenses. I'm getting these tiers of success. And that's really interesting because it means that it doesn't matter. There is no AC that I'm trying to target, and there is no missing, right? It's just how well you do. This has a double edge. One, it means I'm never having a lame turn, right? Worst case with Protective Strike, I deal 7 damage and the target is taunted. If I get the highest tier, I deal 13 damage. Even better, really cool. But either way, I achieve what I wanted, the effect and the damage, right? So it's really kind of neat. But the double edge of that is that when the monsters are attacking the characters, they are always hitting, right? There's always at least that tier 1 impact. And so even a low goblin, given enough time, if you don't kill it first, it will eventually kill you because it will always be hitting you, right? There is no my AC is so high I'm unhittable or anything like that. And it's really about how well you roll, not something else driving the math of the game, which is kind of neat. I like that. It keeps the game a little more bounded and more thrilling because you don't know what you're going to get on these results. Yes, you can add some bonuses to your rolls, but it'll be within certain bounds of the game. I said I would show an example of really cool monsters, and ogres are just some of my favorite monsters that just are absolutely great. Now, there are 2 things about ogres. One is just the general ogre stat block. Let's zoom in on the ogre juggernaut here and look at what it can do. So it's got a pitchfork catapult, where it uses its pitchfork to grab the target, deal damage, and if it gets a tier 2 or tier 3, it actually either pushes it or slides it with that pitchfork, sending the target flying, which, as we mentioned, force movement can cause damage. You could even juice it up by spending Malice. So you see that one Malice in bold at the bottom of Pitchfork Catalog. The catapult. The director can choose to cause it to perhaps be bleeding if the target has a low might. And this can impact 2 creatures. So it's pretty powerful to grab 2 creatures within range 2 melee and send them flying with your catapult. You also can jump into the ground, and within a 3 burst, you are basically jumping up to 6 squares, and then with a 3 space burst, you are causing damage and possibly pushing targets around, right? So it's almost like a cannonball jump in a pool, but on ground by the Ogre Juggernaut. They also have a horrible bellow, which they can do as a maneuver. That's a 3 burst ability. And that is, depending on the tier of success, might frighten them. And while they're frightened, the Ogre gets an edge on strikes against them. So they could do a horrible bellow and then jump up into the air and land down, and it gets this edge on anybody who was frightened, right? So that's a nice 1-2 punch. It even has hurrah, which is when you take damage, it moves up to their speed and can make a free strike. So there's just a lot to this Ogre, right? Like you can see how much fun it is to run this thing in combat. It's just an absolute blast. And the players, the heroes will all be reacting to this because it'll be so impactful to them facing a creature like this. So whether it's the Ogre or that Griffin, really fun. And that's exactly what we're going for in this room number 2. I've mentioned Malice a couple times. I'll just say quickly that on the director side, the director gets a unit of currency, just like you saw the tactician gets focus. The director gets a pool of Malice that you can use to do cool things. And every monster type tends to have special Malice things you can do. So like the Ogres have Malice they can do, Griffin has Malice they can do, and you can spend that in addition to just standard rules for Malice. And so these give you special abilities to keep the game interesting and fun. But again, this is an easy fun fight, so I'm going to only be using Malice if it's needed to create more interest in the encounter. The whole point is that they will eventually chase off this Griffin. And to make it a little more rewarding, once the Griffin flies off, I'm going to have some treasure there that they can find to make them feel good about the fact that they just had this fight and chased away that Griffin, which is kind of neat. All right, so that was our room number 2. Now we're going to go to room number 3, and that is our role-playing or negotiation room. And here we're going to quite literally do a negotiation. We want to do this in games to have this role-player negotiation piece because it's an important part of the experience for any role-playing game, how we interact with each other, and different games will have ways to sort of impact that in some way. Maybe it's completely freeform, or maybe we're using abilities on our sheet to interact with others. Maybe we're just using our backstory. Whatever it is, we want to understand those concepts. And you saw before our abilities, our skills, those are going to come into play. But negotiations in Draw Steel have a certain way of playing out that's really neat, a nice structure to the game. Let's start with the premise. Okay, so they open another room. It can be any of the rooms on the map that they haven't been to. And inside are a bunch of goblins that are playing a game of cards. Surprise is possible. Maybe they get surprised by the PCs, the heroes, and the heroes just run in and attack. That's fine. After a few stabs, the goblins are clearly looking to parley. Or maybe the characters come in and immediately start asking them questions, and parley just is the natural course of action. But what we're pushing for here is not a fight. If there was some sort of fight, the goblins are quick to say they didn't mean any harm. They were just surprised. No one has come here in a long time. They have a small boat moored below this room. They come here to play cards. They tried taking the cards and games with them, but they vanish and return here. Same with any treasure that they've ever found here. And seeing that the characters know nothing about this place, the goblins offer a deal. Hey, we'll share what we know about this place if you give us 2 magic items or a bunch of gold. And that is their opening negotiation. And so let's take a look at the adventure tools and how we help with this. So when you're doing a negotiation, you can use the spreadsheet I have in the design tools to help you guide it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to choose what is the starting attitude of the creature that we're negotiating with. Is it hostile, suspicious, neutral, open, friendly, and trusting? And here I'm going to say the goblins are willing to listen. They were just here to play cards. They're not even neutral. They're like, hey, we're glad to make friends and help as long as you're not asking too much. And in fact, they'd love to profit from you, right? Give me cool stuff, give me gold and magic, and we'll tell you everything we know. The starting attitude drives two items, which is this interest and patience, right? So someone who's hostile has very little interest and almost no patience. But as you go through these, you get more interest and more patience with each level. You can do things like detail the type of NPC, your motivations, your pitfalls. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then you have kind of what your final outcome will be. And in this spreadsheet, you'll see there are a number of rules that you can use that impact the negotiation and how it's going to play out. All right, so our goblins have a starting interest of 3, starting patience of 3. Interest is your eagerness to make a deal. Patience is the time and effort you're willing to devote to the negotiation before you just go, you know what, look, that's my final offer, take it or leave it. The director knows motivation of the goblins, right? And we have suggestions, categories we can choose. So in this case, I might choose 2 of them that they're motivated by freedom. They want a place to hang out. And revelry. They want diversions. They want enjoyment. They want an easy life. Most of the time they're out there doing goblin things. That's a lot of work. This is the time when they hang out and have a life of leisure. The easier it is to do that, say, because they can return to their people that they normally live with gold and magic, well, then they can get that more of that, or maybe even retire if you give them enough. So they're motivated by that freedom and revelry. But it's not greed necessarily. It's more about that diversion time that they want. They also can have a pitfall, which is what they don't care about and will be actively less likely to deal with you if you mention it. So in this case, I'm going to go with power. If you try to talk about them being more powerful, that is not something that they just assume you're trying to lie to them because they see themselves as very weak. Any mention of power makes them feel like you're actually trying to trick them into thinking they can be more than they are. And they don't see themselves as ever becoming powerful. They feel low on the kind of food chain, and they are just trying to escape under the radar and have a life of leisure rather than thinking that they could ever wield power. So motivations and pitfalls are sort of like things you want to either be able to speak to or avoid. And the heroes can now begin the negotiation. We do this in as natural a manner as possible, right? We want to be role-playing and talking but we want to also let the players know that this is a negotiation because some characters may have specific abilities that mention negotiation. So it's important to know that we're in a negotiation. So I would say to the brand new players playing the game, all right, you had that combat, you come in here, you see, we paint the picture of seeing the goblins and we just naturally talk. But I would say you are in what's called a negotiation. Let's keep talking, but keep in mind if you have any abilities that mention negotiations, they can do this. And that when you are making tests, the success or failure of those tests matters. It will either increase their interest or lower it, and it could use up their patience. It often will, and then you run out of time to negotiate. I would also let new players know that the goblins have things that motivate them. There are 2 things. And they also have a pitfall, which triggering that pitfall will cause an automatic failure. Speaking to the motivations can either help you or it could even be great automatic success. So hopefully with the information that's been given, they could do pretty well, right? Like if you make a good argument, you might not have to roll at all, right? If they say, hey, we can easily see that you are looking for this. How about I teach you a new game? Right? And one that you don't need to come here to play. I mean, that sounds amazing to them, right? Like that's just a success and they get a success there, which would be treated as if it was a roll towards, in this case, their motivation, but at the full success. And you can see on this worksheet that how you roll, depending on whether you're trying to uncover motivation or pitfall, whether you're appealing, the different 3 tiers provide different results. So let's walk through those. You could try to uncover a motivation or pitfall. So you'd say to the director, hey, I want to try to learn either a motivation or a pitfall. You make a roll, and if you get tier 3, you learn one motivation or pitfall of your choice. Nothing happens to the patients, which is good. You're just learning something. You get to choose whether you want to learn motivation or pitfall. If you get tier 2, nothing happens. Tier 3, not only do you not learn anything, but the patience goes down by 1. So that's really a test you don't want to fail. You could try to appeal to the motivation. So if you know that they care a lot about freedom, you could argue for something along those lines. And it becomes a slightly easier test to make than if you are just appealing not to motivation, just no motivation or pitfall. So in this case, you might lower their patience by 1 if you get tier 1, but you might instead lower their interest and their patience. Oops, sorry, I had a typo there. Your interest goes up by 1, but your patience does go down by 1. So you're more interested, but you're less, getting worn out through this discussion. If you get tier 3, no change to the patient and your interest goes up by 1. And think of interest as the results you're going to get out of this, right? So they started with this initial deal of give me a bunch of gold and give me a bunch of monies, but they might, or magic items. But if you get their interest high enough, then different results can happen, right? And we can use this worksheet to sort of detail all the things that happen, right? Like they offer nothing and end the negotiation if their interest is 0, might even want to harm you. But number 1 is no deal accepted, but if they still have patience, they may negotiate. And then it gets into the question of whether they take what they asked for or what you asked for, or do they negotiate at the end? They can accept what you want to give and even sweeten the deal, right? So they move for, you don't have to give us any magic items. You don't have to give us any gold. But the fact that you taught us that game or whatever else is, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we'll help you further. We'll give you some clues about this place, right? So that is the kind of thing that you can play with these results. And all of that is driven by the interest and patience going up or down to the point where you either achieve maximum interest and they just go, yeah, we'll do what you asked for, we end, or you run out of patience and wherever interest level you're at, that's what you end up using. If you trigger a pitfall, so you try to say, hey, you could be really powerful if you hang out with us, that's a failure. But again, a well role-played or reasoned argument can be an automatic success, so that can kind of balance that out. All right, so probably the heroes are going to get some information from the goblins, and it's just a question of what they exchange for it. Maybe the goblins are happy to give this and we'll even tell them more, or maybe they had to give out a fair bit of gold to make this work. But the goblins will say, hey, every night, the main hall, that center room, fills with the spirits of the pirate lord and her crew. She made them swear an oath to always serve her, and she would always protect them in turn. Every night they reform here, celebrating their spoils, drinking, but anybody who comes in is fair game for them to take on, and any goblin that's ever gone in there at night does not come back out. So they never go inside at night. As long as the goblins either leave before night or don't enter that main room, there's no danger. The pirates just make a lot of noise in there and carry out their revelry. And around the time dawn comes, they fade away like they've never been there. Also, they have heard that there's a huge treasure here. The ghost pirates must know where it is. No one has ever managed to find it. In case it wasn't clear from what they might have said before, perhaps as an additional benefit, if this negotiation went well, the goblins would say, anything we've ever taken of value from here has returned to this place. So even if you could find the treasure, unless you sort of deal with whatever is going on here, you won't get to keep it, which is really important. All right, so that's our first 3 steps down. Hopefully we're having a lot of fun. We've had this neat fight. We use skills. We understand our character sheets better. We've done a negotiation, so we've learned that system. And now we're going to showcase some additional gameplay. That's our 4th step in the Find, Learn to Play. And there are a lot of things we could do here. We could do taking a respite, which is pretty cool. When you take what you might think of as a short rest, well, it's not a short rest. It's a long rest. You can always spend a recovery to gain some stamina back. So you can always heal that way, both in combat and out. But if you want to really replenish, you actually need to spend a whole day resting. Now, what's cool about that is then you also get to do neat downtime activities. So in the right kind of scenario, that is a thing that might be really neat because it'd be very interesting to the players to think about what they can do as downtime. But in this case, I'm going to go with another fun system, which is the montage. So that's what my step 4 is going to be, to showcase a different type of the game, or a different angle in the game, aspect of the game, is going to be to show a montage. And a montage is similar to a negotiation, but it's trying to do a different thing. The montage is saying, hey, think of that scene in the movie where everybody contributed in some way. And we see that not even necessarily in chronological order, though often it is, of the shots fading back and forth between everything that everybody did that was really cool, right? So what we could do here is say, all right, you want to search the other rooms and find clues now that you know what the goblins told you, and you understand some of what's going on. You're going to search for additional clues. And that sets up the scene of the montage. And now the rules of the montage kick in, and I'll again pull up my spreadsheet. So we can again use the spreadsheet to take a look at how to set up a montage. We've got the level of our heroes, and then we get to choose what the difficulty is. And the number of successes and failures will be driven by those players. And we can choose whether we want it to be, easy, or do we want it to be moderate, hard, right? So I might make it a moderate challenge. That would be a success of 6. We want 6 successes before we get 4 failures. But I might say, this is really an intro, so let's go for easy. And there we want to have 5 successes before we get 5 failures. The next thing I can do when I'm designing this is to have a number of challenges that we put in. And montages tend to play out in 2 rounds. Sometimes something can happen in the middle of a montage, like even a small combat or large one. You can also have new challenges that are introduced in particular rounds. And those challenges are really the kinds of things that we want to be obvious issues they must resolve. So in this case, where we're talking about running around this map of the base and exploring it, we might say, okay, what are some things that the players have to deal with? And we're going to tell them all of them, and they're going to choose to tell us sort of what's the remaining part of the story, the montage part of it, right? So one room holds a journal, but the room is filled with webs and spiders. The planks that make up the floor of one of the room are rotten. They've broken apart in some places. Looks really dangerous to get through, but there is a chest in a far corner, also on rotten boards. Boy, it looks like that chest itself could just drop into the waves at any moment. Another room, the floor has broken, and under the waves we can see a ghostly pirate who looks like they're kind of a frightened down below. You can see them under the water shimmering, and they look very frightened. And now I could say that maybe I know that this ghostly pirate never made the oath and can actually tell the characters that they're bound by something else, which is a fear of the giant sharks that swim nearby. And you've got to talk them out of it so that they will come out and share the information with you, and then actually be free and flow to the afterlife. All of that giving you a lot of clues about what's going on. The cabinets in one room have fallen on top of a desk, so you'd have to move that to get to the contents within without damaging. Another place, the support boards have broken beneath the floor, causing the floor of this sort of front of a ship to lean one way or the other, right? Tip one side or the other. And there is a nautical globe that is in the center. And so if it rolls too far and the ground tips too much, it'll fall into the water and be lost. There's actually a clue in that nautical globe. So if 2 characters can get out there and balance, they could grab the globe, or one walking very middle could possibly do it. And so this montage is something that the characters themselves, the players, would choose how they want their heroes to interact with it. And then one of them might say, okay, I'm going to deal with the webs and spiders. I'll set it on fire. And someone goes, wait, won't that burn the journal? Oh, yeah, okay. So no, instead what I'm going to do is, and they describe that. And at the end of the description of what they do, we're going to roll a test, unless you just feel like, oh, that's such a great idea. I don't even need to make a check. You don't need to make a test. That just succeeds. If that's not the case and there is still some doubt, then a test must be made, and you decide for each check what the challenge level of that check is. So, let's say that I come up with a really great way to get past the webs and the spiders. It might be automatic, or it might be an easy test. Or maybe I come up with something that is really hard. It's like, wow, I don't know how you would succeed at that. That's a hard test. Let's see if you can do it, right? Or I might even say to as director, might say to a player, the skill you suggested would be a moderate test, but without this test, or if you had a different skill, it would be an easy test. And so you've got to choose what you want to do, or you want a different character to try that. So we go through player by player, seeing what challenge they take on, how they succeed at it. Usually, succeeding at a challenge means no one else can do that same challenge. But in some cases, it might be that you could make more than one test. These examples I gave don't really work that way, but maybe two people could do the test to get across those support boards that tilt to one side or the other, because they can both make checks to stabilize it. So that could be two people. And once we've determined the success, either because we got to enough successes or we determined that it's a failure because they got to the failures first, then we have our outcome. And based on that, I would describe the various clues that they find in these places from the montage. So what might they find out? The Pirate King's oath binds the spirits here unwillingly. They agreed to something not understanding that it was forever and in perpetuity, right? They are now bound here in a way that's not okay. The Pirate King, she has forced this servitude, but has fooled herself into believing that it's for the pirates' crew benefit and wants to keep feeling tied to this world, even though they all died long ago. In reality, she's created a living hell for the pirates, and she's the only one who's sort of gaining from this and fooling herself into thinking that it's a good situation. If there is a combat, any ghosts killed will cease to exist, but they don't move on to the afterlife. If the Pirate King is killed, the bond breaks, releasing any remaining spirits to their afterlife, and then they do get to go on to their final rest. So that becomes important for our next step, our final battle. So step 5 is the thrilling boss battle. Here, we already understand a lot about the game, having gone through those first 4 rooms, and we're excited for final combat to bring it to an exciting conclusion. Here, we're going to jump into this main room, and we are going to have a cool fight in that central chamber. There's a lot of elevation. There are chandeliers to swing from. There are cool tables. And in fact, when you come out, there is actually ale all over the place, and food sort of magically as part of this binding. It's everywhere. Won't actually fill you up, you'll find in the morning. But for the interim, it behaves every bit like real food. And this creates slippery patches, maybe. It might mean that you could throw a cup of ale at someone. The characters come in, and the pirate lord, she will have nothing to do with them, immediately demands that these pirates either swear an oath of fealty to forever serve her and be bound by the very same magic, or it's combat time. And will not listen to reason at this time. However, the characters can make good points, which will weaken her stamina, her resolve, if you will, because she has sort of deluded herself into thinking that this is all what everybody wants, and not that it's driving her crew into an absolute hell. So as combat begins, if the characters are making good points, that can weaken her stamina as if they dealt damage, but it may take an action to do that, or maybe an action deals more stamina than if you use a maneuver to make a test. But here we're going to we're going to use the same rules of combat we saw before. If we go by the Delian Tomb approach, now we can use additional powers. And you can see here the way Delian Tomb did it. And you get your second encounter, allows you to use this special bonus that you have for disengaging as a tactician. You get Concussive Strike, which you can do melee or range to daze targets. You have a parry ability. When you are dealt damage, you can try to escape that damage. And you have also a third encounter that we could use now, this Otherworldly Grace, and even a fourth encounter, Strike Now. So as you can see, there are a lot of abilities that the characters get. And so each character sheet is like this, where when you play Delian Tomb, 4 encounters, you slowly learn this. In this case, we've only got 2, so it might be that you just get all of these things on the second part, second encounter, third encounter, fourth encounter. You get to use all of those. So we would pause, give the players some time to familiarize themselves, ask questions about this, and then we would jump into this combat, this exciting combat. And so we would jump into this thrilling boss fight and discover everything that it offers. And similar to what we saw the combat with the Griffin, really neat abilities. So we want to give our pirate boss, she would have some really cool powers that she could use. Probably does a bunch of neat daring do. And what I might do is describe how, as she does neat things like slide across a puddle or use a candelabra to swing from it and land down and attack somebody, those kinds of things, vault over the steps, those actually ooh and ah all of the pirate crew. If the players do that, it also reduces her stamina as the other pirates realize, hey, it's not just our pirate queen who's really cool. She's neat, but the heroes are too, and that weakens their bond as well, lowering her stamina. So it could also be a way to create a very piratey kind of final fight because we're driving at that, and we could easily tip players into that, either just straight up telling them or giving them easy tests to figure it out if they're not noticing it on their own. But this would create a cinematic kind of fight, encourage them to be very cinematic in their capabilities, and of course use their really neat encounters. As they defeat, if they decide to fight any of the ghosts, they would realize that the ghosts are minions, so it's very easy to defeat them. And when they die, they just sort of like would poof, but with like you can tell that this is a creature that is ceasing to exist rather than going to its afterlife. So though the pirates are all forced to attack you, you don't really want to attack them. You want to focus on the boss fight, on the boss part of the fight. So, and the reason for that is because I'm assuming this is like a convention environment. You want to keep this going pretty quickly. So we don't want this massive combat here. We want a big thrilling scene, but we're working through, you're kind of taking damage from minions, but everybody's trying to focus on the boss, either making good arguments, showing off the cool cinematic things you do, or just attacking that boss. I don't have an actual stat block for her, but you can imagine the kind of neat things that a pirate boss might be able to do. And there are actually some cool monsters I could repurpose, reskin easily in the monster book that's right over there. You can see there. So that would be our thrilling boss fight. And as the pirate lord is brought down, our pirate queen, begins to fade, and she realizes the error of her ways, apologizes to her crew, and they might give her one last salute and thank the heroes, and reveal where she would give her treasure to what she says, you are worthy to inherit my fortune, and give the location of where it is. Now that she is laid to rest, the other pirates thank the heroes and fade away as well. There's some opportunities there. This is a part where we want to reward our players for the conclusion of the adventure and the thrilling boss fight. There are a couple of neat things that Drawsteel has. One of them is you can get followers or even assistants that help you do things like craft. And so it's possible that one of these ghosts would remain beyond, doesn't want to sever a bond, wants to stay in this world, and it forms the bond instead to one of the heroes, perhaps the person that defeated the pirate queen. And they might either become a ghostly companion, which would be cool, or they could become an artisan who helps with downtime activities, crafting, right? Maybe they're the blacksmith or the brewer or something interesting like that and could help the companion. The seamstress, right? A lot of neat ideas that you could do. Tailor, whatever it would be. So you could come up with something like that as a neat, interesting reward. They might get a title like, Pirate Lords or something like that. And they could decide the fate if this was the beginning of a neat nautical campaign. So things like titles, followers, those are really neat rules that rewards that are in the Drawsteel rules. You can have things like ingredients to make cool items. So maybe the things needed to craft a really cool rapier or armor. There could be consumable items or treasure as well, as you'd find in other games. Wealth tends to be more abstract, so it tends to be a level of wealth that you get. So while you can deal in coins, right, the goblins can ask you for 500 coins. The reality is it's more like your wealth tends to sort of be at a certain level, and so you could just simply pay them. And in this case as well, you might get a chest of coins that maybe everybody's wealth goes up 1, or 2 characters can have their wealth go up 1. You can figure that out. But the whole point being, you get a neat reward from this thrilling boss fight, something that's lasting and interesting and fitting from the adventure. That's very much the Drawsteel way. And that would conclude the exercise. So that's our 5-room learn to play. I'll just list the 5 things again here. You had the skills, the easy fun fight, the role player negotiation, the showcase, of the gameplay additional piece. In this case, we chose to do a montage, and then the thrilling boss battle that brought it to a conclusion. So I hope you enjoyed seeing this 5-room learn to play for Draw Steel. If you're excited by Draw Steel, go check out Road to Broadhurst. It's a free download, which comes also with a version of the rules. There is an amazing license for Draw Steel. It's one of the best licenses for creators out there. So you can actually find all kinds of cool websites that show the rules, sometimes even translated, or in databases, so you can search things like monsters and traps and all kinds of neat things like that. Terrain, which I didn't talk about, but it's really cool in Draw Steel. And if you're interested in Draw Steel, check out the Patreon that MCDM has. I do work with Draw Steel and with MCDM on a Draw Steel project. I'm the director for the Crack the Sun project, which is a huge mega adventure. Really fun working with some amazingly talented designers to bring you a really, really cool adventure for Crack the Sun. I'm excited to soon be playtesting it as the first authors turn in their drafts. So I love a lot about what Draw Steel brings to the table. Hope this video has helped, and I will see you next time.